The prologue called it a wound. Shattered perhaps it was in ring as abscess Marika's shadow lengthened. Fires was never meant that to exist lands between convulsing like a dying beast. The prologue called it a wound. Shattered perhaps it was in ring as abscess. Fires was never meant that to exist. Flames did not fail. It exorcised was a scalpel, a parasite. What if the lands between was never meant to exist? Lothric's refusal to rekindle the flame was no surrender. It was a scalpel. Stormveil's ashes hold the proof. High's blood seared the fire's leash, not the world's hope. The first flame did not perish, it was unchained. For eons its light was a cage, a lie fed to empires and kings. By breaking the cycle, Lothric shattered the parasite's reign. The ruins whisper his truth. The age of fire was a wound that bled forever. He did not betray the flame, he exposed its chains. The lords of cinder are many, but Lothric's spark was the first to defy. His treason was a covenant of ash and dawn. The answer lies in the blood still staining Stormveil's stones. Why did he burn the bridge? Wait. The next domino falls where the flame's shadow was longest. The age of fire was a lie sold in embers. Its light did not give, it took. Lothric saw the cost written in the ash of older worlds. He struck the match, not in rage, in mercy. The inscriptions do not lie. The fire was burned to save what it starved. The lands between were never a gift. They were a wound stitched by a prince who knew the thread would fray. His curse was clarity. To see the flame's shadow stretch too long, its light a noose. The castle's ruins whisper of a crown rejected, of a throne drowned in molten regret. The age fractured not by accident, but by a hand that knew when to let go. When the fire died, so did the lie. What remains is a question etched in every crumbling wall. If the lands between were born in ash, what waited in the dark before the flame ever rose? Steel met steel, brother met brother. The age of fire had forged their alliance until it demanded a sacrifice neither could make. Lothric's blade cleaved the air, sharp with purpose. Lorian's armor rang in reply, unyielding as his resolve. They had stood side by side, twin pillars of Gwyn's twilight reign. Now they stood as enemies. Why? The question hangs bitter as ash. Not for revenge, not for power. Lothric saw the first flames rot, the curse gnawing through the lands between. He saw Gwyn's fire falter, its light a dying star, and he chose to burn it. The clash shattered their bond. Lorian's armor, once a symbol of unity, became a cage. Lothric's strike broke, it shattered the illusion that fire could save what was already dying. The elder brother fell not to treachery, but to truth. Gwyn's kingdom crumbled in the wake, the undead curse spread like a plague. Yet Lothric did not rejoice, he had not sought ruin, he had sought release. The lands between, born of flame and fracture, were never meant to last. Their existence was a lie told to dying stars. His betrayal was no act of madness, it was a wound carved to stop a slower death. The fire's hold fractured, the eclipse loomed. And in the dark, new sparks stirred unbound by Gwyn's failing light. Did the lands between exist to be saved, or to be undone? Lothric's path was never about preserving a world. It was about preparing the ground for what would rise when the flame finally fell. The rage in his eyes that day was not fury. It was the quiet of a man who had burned his future to keep the rest of the world from freezing. And still the question lingers. If the lands between were born in ash, what waited in the dark before the flame ever rose? The kiln's breath is a furnace. His fingers curl around the twin swords. The steel drinks the first flame's blood, and the flame drinks his. No shout, no tremor, just a boy king who knows the fire's chains are tighter than they seem. The lords of cinder wait for a heir to complete their loop, to fan the embers into a new age, but Lothric's hand tightens. The swords glow, cursed, inherited, a brand not a banner. He has seen the fire's arithmetic, every rain a debt, every flame a chokehold. Let the ashes rise, let the lands between crack, the kiln howls. The swords cut deep, slicing not just the flame but the thread that bound it to the world. The first flame seethes, its light twisting to black. The curse was never in the blades. It was in the choice to wield them for the fire's will. Lothric's choice is to reject the will. The lands between were not born in fire. They were carved in the space between a flame's death rattle and the dark's first breath. The fire's lie was that it gave life, its truth is it gave *obligation*. Lothric's treason is a math problem, one flame dies. 1,000 chains break, the cost, a kingdom's faith, a name whispered as heretic, the swords fall, the kiln's light drowns. Somewhere a cycle shudders to a halt, the lands between are no longer between, they are asterisk adrift asterisk, what waits in that adrift? No flame to bind it, no curse to name it, just the quiet after a boy king's whisper, asterisk let it burn, asterisk. But to understand what came next, you must understand what he gave up. When Marika shattered the ring after Godwin's soul was torn, Lothric chose to let the fire die. His blood became ash, the covenant a lie. The lands between, a wound, not a world. What was born in that fracture still bleeds. Lothric's defiance did not spare the world. The lands between cracked like a dying star. Marika's blade split the ring as Godwin's soul turned to screaming dust. Gwyn's hollow rain watched the flames starve. His nights became husks, their shadows blooming with rot. The undead curse was no accident. It was the price of the end. Lorian burned first. His body, twin to Lothric's, could not outrun the flame's decay. The twin swords, once brothers in blood, now lie buried in a relic, the other a ghost. The people of the lands. They never knew their world was a scar. Cities rose on shattered oaths. Heroes fought for a covenant that bled. What did Lothric gain? A delay. A pause in the collapse. The lands between was never a victory, it was a bandage on a severed vein. Every soul born there carried the fracture in their bones. Marika's shattering did not create order. It drowned what remained in a storm of fire and regret. The names are forgotten, the victims of a war that should have been avoided. Yet the wound persists, it pulses, it waits. And somewhere in the hollow hearts of the lands between, the echoes of Lorian's final breath still hunt for a way back. 236 words. The twin swords rise, flame bleeds from their edges. Blood of the first flame, seared into steel by a prince who knew his veins carried the same poison. His hands, once gloved in royal blue, crack like parched earth. The fire does not warm, it gnaws. Stormvale's towers watch, their shadows lengthening as the Erdtree's light wanes. Did he bargain with the dark, or merely unshackle the world from a brighter cage? Stone groans beneath his boots. The castle's heart, its great hall, now a charnel house, holds the weight of his choice. Inscriptions scar the walls, asterisk the heir who burned the fire to save the dead. Asterisk chisel marks twist the letters, as if the mason's hands trembled. Or as if the stone itself resisted. Here, the air reeks of melted gold and charred bone. The first flame's echo, once a hymn, now rasps like a dying beast. Lothric's crown lies half-buried in ash. Its gems, once mirrors of celestial fire, glint with a sickly greenish hue. The swords fall. One strikes the keep's central pillar. The other his own palm, a covenant broken, a sacrifice made, the curse takes hold. His eyes, once twin beacons of the Erdtree's favor, dim to hollow sockets. Yet no scream follows. Only the wet crackle of sinew twisting, of a man becoming something that predates names. The hunter becomes the hunted, the beast becomes the gate. Centuries later, pilgrims trace the twin swords' runes, asterisk cursed inheritance, asterisk the etchings whisper, asterisk defiance forged in dying light, asterisk the blades, though, are colder than the void between stars. Their edges no longer burn. They asterisk remember. Asterisk those who lift them feel the weight of a kingdom's last breath, of pressure that bends knees, that turns vision to tears. Some say the swords hum, others swear they weep. Stormvale's ruins do not forgive. The inscriptions, now weathered to ghostly reliefs, still hiss warnings through the wind. Travelers report figures at the castle's edge, kings in tatters, warriors with too many scars, all pausing as if listening to the Erdtree's call. Or to the silence that followed Lothric's fall. He is not a traitor, he is the wound that refused to fester. The cycle demands cinders. It demands a liberator. And so the prince walks, a myth bound to the land's slow exhale, a hollow god, a shattered queen, a hunter who forgot his prey. The twin swords wait, the fire waits, and the lands between, unmade and remade, burn. The crumbling spires of Stormvale still whisper his name. Prince Lothric lingers there, a hollow knight in tarnished armor, his shadow etched into the ash that coats the ruins. The cold seeps into his bones now, a punishment for a crime the world forgot to name. He did not betray the first flame out of spite. He shattered the covenant because the fire had become the Chainscolden, glowing, inescapable. His blade, once raised to defend the lands between, became the axe that split its foundation. The Erdtree wilts. Its roots, gnarled and silvered, clutch at the void where the flame once burned. The great jar, that hollow god of endings, waits for the Ashen One's choice. Relink the deathless child, let the stars smother. Claim the throne for Shadow, each path mirrors Lothric's own. His ghost watches, unblinking, as the twin swords remain sheathed for fire, one for dark. The wolf time ticks in the marrow of the world. What if the lands between were never a gift, but a mistake? A hollow space between endings, born of a king's final act. The Ashen One walks where he walked, burdened by the same question, end the cycle or become it. Lothric's treason was not an end. It was a door, and the wind that howls through Stormvale carries the scent of a Shaft fire dying, and something older stirring. The Erdtree's fate is written in the blood of the forgotten. The prince's stillness is not defeat, it is witness. The twilight of Gwyn's reign was a slow asphyxiation, flame embers dimmed to ash. The undead curse seeped into bone and soil, a rot no fire could purge. Gwyn, High Lord of the First Flame, clung to his throne as the world withered at a king crowned in inevitability. His sacrifice was not his own. It was the world's, a slow combustion of what once burned bright. Prince Lothric stood at the same pyre, the same embers glowed in his palm. But his hand trembled not with fear, but with the weight of a choice. To let the flame die was treason. To let it burn was death. He turned, the fire hissed, recoiling from his touch, the lands between shuddered. A fissure split the sky a crack in the cycle's iron mask. Gwyn's legacy was a funeral pyre. Lothric's was a spark in a dry field. One accepted decay, the other invited chaos. The difference, Gwyn's flame fed the curse. Lothric's let it starve. The withering lands did not weep, they gasped. Ash fell like snow, but beneath it roots stirred, not in service to the flame, not in thrall to the Erdtree, in freedom. The cold dawn that followed was not Gwyn's, it was Lothric's. A dawn where the first flame's absence was not a void, but a question. What if the lands between was never a gift? What if it was a cage? The prince's betrayal was not a wound, it was an incision. A scalpel cutting through the myth of endless cycles. His stillness was not defeat. It was a held breath, a pause between the end of one age and the stuttering birth of another. The Erdtree's blood does not forget. But neither does the fire Lothric turned away. Some sacrifices are not ends, they are beginnings. The prince's stillness is not witness, it is waiting. What if the lands between was never meant to exist? The first flame's embers did not fade, they were snuffed. Prince Lothric did not abandon the fire. He shattered its cage, knowing the world built within it would crumble. Ashes of kingdoms, the screams of dragons, the hollowing of heroes, each was a price written in the margins of a script older than flame. The lands between were a wound, not a world. A scar where the first flame's hunger gnawed at the void, stitching shadow to shadow with borrowed light. Lothric's blade, blackened by the undead's curse, became the thread that cut the stitch. His betrayal was the only truth the flame could not consume, that some chains must break to prevent a greater binding. Lorian's pyre still burns, but it is a lie, a candle in a storm pretending to hold back the dark. Lothric's pyre was a wildfire, meant to devour the map so the land might remember its own shape. The Lords of Cinder are many. Their names are etched in the cracks between ages. What remains when the flame dies is not darkness, it is choice. The prince's stillness is not waiting, it is watching. The dark does not need witnesses, it needs hands to shape it. Lothric's treason was the first hand extended into the void. The fire was never the enemy, the fire was the cage. What if Lothric's sacrifice was the key to the lands between salvation, a fracture in the fire's cage, not a flaw? The Ashen One stands at the chasm's edge. To relink the cycle, let the Erdtree fade, or seize the dark as their own each path carves the world anew. Will they mend the flame, or let shadows birth a forgotten dawn? The land